Hey, my name is Chad. This video we are going to try to take a good look at the RCBS Matchmaster powder dispenser. So I've taken a few weeks to actually put this video together just because I wanted to spend some time with it and try to get it figured out as well as I could. And over those weeks I've noticed a few things that I think would be good for anybody that is looking to get one of these. Overall, it's really awesome and it's great at what it's meant to do. There are some odd quirks about it that you definitely want to know about if you are considering one. So the main benefit to getting one of these is you want very small differences between your charges. So it'll measure to a 0.02 grain accuracy, and depending on the speed you have it set at, you can let it run slower and not risk as many overcharges. But typically it's going to say a charge is good if it's within 0.04 grains of the specified charge weight. So like I'm running a 39.8, if it hits 39.86, it tells me I've got an overcharge. If it runs a 39.84, then it says that's good to go. So I usually like to run at 39.80, 82, and 84. Usually I'll pick one grain out. Running H4350, one grain is about 0.02. So it is very accurate and precise when it comes to making the measurements, but there's definitely some stuff to know about. And honestly, this manual is super huge and kind of a complete waste. We'll talk about that. Okay, so overall, getting it set up is just like anything else. You get it out of the box. It's packaged quite well. It does have dual tubes on it, and there's a lock on the side that you've got to unscrew, and that releases the plenum so it can properly measure. And once you get that all run through and set up, it's not too bad. What I will say is if you try to follow the directions and just run it through as a straight manual powder dispenser, you're going to be highly frustrated. There are many settings in here, and it's not like the Frankford Intellidropper, so that thing is super cheap and does a really good job for what it's made for. It also has that powder cow function where you can let it run through a cycle and it will figure out what is the best way to dispense your particular powder, and it does a really good job of it. Like Frankford Arsenal really knocked it out of the park with that machine. Sometimes you get a bad machine, and it seems to be more common with Frankford. One reason I wanted to go to this is just to have that slightly more accurate charge and know that it's going to be there every time. But the setup procedure is the most frustrating. Now, going through the manual, there is a way to do everything straight through the buttons on the machine. I will tell you now, don't even waste your time with it. It is a complete frustrating process to try and go through and do it that way. So take the manual, read it so you're understanding what everything does, but first get your phone and go ahead and get the app, download it, and Bluetooth link it. So that's what we're going to take a look at right now. Okay, so when the scale is first started up, they do tell you to let it warm up for 20 minutes. We're just going to kind of skip that because I just want to show you functions. I'm not actually loading anything that I'm going to use in a match. What you'll see is your basic screen. You do have the option to go through all the different modes and change a lot of stuff from this push button screen. Now, doing anything with these is incredibly frustrating. I will tell you that. Now, what I like to do, and what I have found is the absolute best, is to go ahead and use your phone and use the RCBS app. And I'm probably going to have to, one thing it doesn't like is for the app to be left open. So usually whenever I'm starting up, I've got to, close the app down completely. But it'll tell you that you don't have a device selected. I've already got it in here. I just named it 0000. But you'll do that. You'll get a flashing blue down here that lets you know that you are connected. What I always like to start with is calibrating. Now it'll tell you to remove the powder scale, then it'll stabilize, it'll zero, no weights on it, and it'll tell you to drop the 20 on. It'll tell you when it's stable. Pop the 20 off. Now you will see there is quite a few little pieces of... So once everything is stabilized and calibrated, we're good to go. But you see these little pieces of powder all over the place. What I have learned is that it does not particularly like staying in the pan. So once we are calibrated, you can go in here to the powder options, and this is where you can search by different powders. You've got a lot of slots where you can build custom profiles and set them. So just to give an example, if we were going to do a dispensing here, first what we would need to do is take off our covers, which I have found are good to leave on here, just because it does tend to like to dribble some out, especially if you're filling. So as you're filling, you definitely want to have these covers on, because it will load up and become kind of a mess. Okay, so say you've already gone through and built your profiles, so I can select a profile here, and you can see all the ones I've been testing and tinkering with. So we're going to go with my newest one, number 15, and it will display on here that we're putting in user code 15, and then we'll set it to auto, and then we'll just go with my weight that I've been doing, 39.8, and dispense. And what it's going to do is send that number here, and pretty much I'm done with the app at this point. So once you get everything set, you can use it to send, and then you're done. And it's going to run through. And this is where it gets tricky, is learning when to tell it to stop running the big tube and go to the small tube. And we are 39.80. So that's impressive. I really thought we'd have an overthrow. Usually I get 1 or 2 overthrows at the start of a session. And I usually run it with the cover on just to keep the splatter out. Now I finally had to learn to slow down on the small tube trickling. I was running it too fast and it would easily overshoot. Now that's within range, 39.78. That is 0.02 grains below the charge weight goal. So to the machine, that's within range. Usually what I'll do is I'll take that, drop it in, and then get one of these pieces that has fallen out, and I'll just pick up that one and drop it in with it. That usually puts me at 39.8 where I want to be. So now say we don't want to charge anymore, we just hit cancel. That puts it back to manual mode, and it's not going to run anymore. So once you're up and running, that's the best way to do it. It'll give you a overall completion. So we ran 2 and they were no unders and no overs. So we had good luck there. Now, what I wanted to show you is all of these options here. So what we can do is you can run through their shared system and find your particular powder and get kind of a good starting point for what other people have tested and uploaded and seem to have luck with. For me, what I'm going to do is I want to show you some of these different options. So you see we've got slow, fast, fastest, and slowest. Match and standard. Standard mode is going to be like your normal dispensers where you're running at a 0.1 measurement. Match mode is going to go into the 0.02 and give you that extra decimal point. Okay, now where it gets really tricky is coming in here and adjusting the large tube, small tube, long trickle, short trickle, and if you don't set those right, it's very easy to overshoot your targets. So with the way it's set right now, large tube will start working if target weight is 30 grains or more away, and then it will stop 3 grains from the target. And then your small tube, if you have that number set at 50, it'll stop 1 grain from the target. Now that's when it's initially running and spitting everything out fast. The small tube is going to stop 1 grain from the target weight. The large tube is going to stop 3 grains from the target weight. Now where it gets fun on the trickling. So you can adjust they call it angle of rotation. I figured out that really just means how long does it spin. So the long trickle will go for 400 microseconds at number 3, and you can adjust that up. And then the pause, that's where it gets really important. You want to have it pause for enough time for the scale to measure what was just dropped. And then the long trickle, the way it's set with the number 20, will stop 4/10 of a grain from the target weight, and then it'll do short trickles. So I have it set at 0, so that's the lowest you can do for 25 microseconds, just a little dit, dit, dit. And then I've got it set to pause for 1500 microseconds. So we're going to go to one of my early builds, so we'll call it the one I've got in slot 9. So that one's set to stop with the large tube 1 grain from the target weight, and the small tube at 0.64 grains from the target weight, and then only a small amount of time that it's going to wait in between trickles. And that you'll find real quick where the problem is. So I'll put that at we'll just do 40. And watch this. It's gonna run too fast and very likely overcharge. So 4006 overcharged. Not much, mind you, but it did overcharge. Usually what I was finding is having the number set too close to what I wanted it to stop at, it would just overshoot by anywhere from 6/8 of a grain to 1.5 grains. Like sometimes what's flowing through the tube just keeps on going and pushes hard out, and then we got a bit of a pickle. See, it didn't pause long enough between those. Yeah, I guess that one's pretty close. So there is some fine-tuning to do with this. Now, we'll say we're complete there. Now what we can do is go in here and tell, like I just want to show some more drastic, the large tube number. So what I found is stopping the large tube anywhere from 2 to 4 grains from the target weight is much preferred. It gives you less chance for an overcharge. And stopping the small tube, really I like it closer to a grain from where it needs to be, and then letting it trickle the rest of the way. So now let's look at these trickle adjustments. This is not very well explained in the book, and for some reason it does not ever let you edit any of this stuff once it is saved to a number. So what we're going to have to do is make a new one. We'll go with here, we'll say we'll stop the large tube at number 7, so 3.5 grains from the target. We'll stop the small tube at, we'll try 7 also. So that's only 0.14 from the target weight. Way too close. Now we'll go with a long trickle of 0, so that'll be a very small one. And then the response time 0, so it'll pause a good bit before And we'll just leave it at 30 so it stops long trickling at, actually let's jump that up to 45. No, we want to drop that down. Put that at 30. So 4/10 of a grain will stop the long trickle. Short trickle at, we'll give that 0 and 0. So I just want to show you the lowest settings for everything. And then you have to give it a slot number. So we'll give it 16. I know number 14 is what I'm looking at, or 15 is my number that I use. Now let's just go with 40.0. Okay, see what happens here. This should be very high likelihood that it will give us the number that we want. It's just going to trickle very, very, very slowly. So if you have a lot of time to spend, then something like this would be a good way to go. See, we wanted to stop at 40.0 and we ran all the way to 40.44 because we have things set to drastically. Now, what we want to do is see if we can be edited so we let the large tube stop too close. So if we bump that up to 10, so it'll stop 5 grains. I think I had good luck with 4 grains, but we need the small tube. We only had it stopping 0.14 grain from the target. So we need to raise that number up and let it stop at a higher, further away from where we want the target weight to be. So let's go up to 28. Let's try that. Now we'll see what happens here. So we just told it that we want each of the tubes to stop further away from the target weight. And then it's got to input 40.0. That's the slowest part of this whole process, is getting everything up and running. So ran all the way up to 38. Now it'll trickle, but it's trickling really slow. So you can see how little the tube is moving. Now that's good, it gets us where we want to be. And it read my hand getting close to it and overshot. So that's kind of the ideas. It will stop both tubes much quicker or much earlier, and then it will trickle very, very, very slowly. Now that one's a little bit heavy, but it got it pretty close. So that's what happens if you have it set to, too much. Let's tell the small tube to stop a little further away. 7/10 of a grain. Now let's do a long trickle. Let's bump that up to 500 microseconds, and then the pause between it, bump that up to 1750. So it's a longer pause. Or let's drop it down to 500 microseconds. And then short trickle, let's run it all the way up to the extreme at 9. And then the pause, 2500. I just want to kind of show what some of the more extreme numbers will do. Stopped about 38. Now you see it's waiting a long time before running a trickle out of the tube, but it's running it really fast. So when it does run the tube, it's dropping a lot of powder, but it's waiting a long time to make sure that the scale can read what it dropped, but it ran through too fast. So you've got to consider the speed at which the powder is coming through the tube. Now that one, we just got lucky with that. So 40.04, it didn't even really need to trickle any. Sometimes that happens. I mean, when you get it dialed in, this thing can really boogie. Okay, so you see 40.12 over what we wanted it to be, just because that small tube is kicking out too much at a time. So that's where, oops, well, we'll give it another shot. So that one finally got there, 40.0. All right, so what's going on there is we have the short trickle. So it's trickling fairly slowly, but it's at the max. Like 250 microseconds is considerably more than 25 microseconds. And then the response time, so it's waiting a long time between them, but if you drop that to 0, it'll just kick it out really, really fast. So let's see what happens if we go with like a higher short trickle number, but a slow pause in between. That got us there. Okay, let's try something. Let's change the small tube to stop. So the way they explain it is kind of weird. The stop point, instead of just being able to put in what number you actually want it to be, it is going to make you pick one of these numbers that will correspond to so far away from whatever it is. So let's see what happens if we give the long trickle a high trickle number, but let it pause a good ways in between, and then that'll stop. Let's go at 0.28 grains from the target. So that's going to very likely over trickle. We'll leave our short at the same place. So what I have found in doing this is it really is just a lot of trial and error. And once you go through a couple times and make changes to these numbers, you will start to pick up what numbers you need to change. Like I was having problems with, I would get right up to where I wanted to be, and then when it would short trickle, I was overshooting the mark by just a little bit. So I went in and slowed down the speed that the small tube spins, and then giving it a few more microseconds in between trickles. See how that just, and we went to 40.18. So if you try to do it too fast, you're going to overshoot your target. But once you get it all figured out and learned, you're able to get something set up that is going to be able to fairly consistently run the numbers that you want. And changing the slowest slow, fast and fastest, that is a very good way to adjust it. Like I could run it on the slowest setting, but I am trying to save time as well as get accuracy. So I'm running it at not quite the slowest speed, but also not either of the two fastest speeds. And you can see it's moving plenty quick enough. But I set it to 40. Now it's going to take more time to pause and think in between each trickle. And that's just the way I finally got it set up. I would prefer to have fewer overcharges and let it take a few extra seconds. And ta-da, 40.0. So once you finally get your setting in, it's pretty awesome. So we're going to say that's kind of the trick on this. So like I said, what you really want to do is pay attention to all of these numbers that are in here. So large tube, that's obviously telling your large tube. If it's, if you're working with 40s or above, you can set it so it's pretty much, you can set it to where if it's more than 5 grains away from the target, it's going to activate the large tube, and then have it set to stop, let it stop several grains away from your target. That just slows down the rush of powder coming out. And then the small tube, have that stop. I'd like stopping it at least 1 grain, 1.5 grains away from the target. Each powder is going to be a little bit different, but play with that until you find the point that it likes, where it's not overcharging, letting too much powder run through the tube. Now the long trickle, that's going to be where it starts out at, and you can set that to run up to, here I got 0.4 of a grain set, but you want it to not spin too fast that it pushes out too much powder to overshoot, but it will pause for long enough time for the numbers to catch up on the scale. And then the short trickle, you can set it down to 25 microseconds or all the way up to 250 microseconds. So that's just how long it's going to spin. And then the response time is how long is it going to wait before it spins again. So understanding all of that is not very well explained in the manual, but it makes a big difference when you're actually using it. Now, one thing to understand that's kind of a bummer about it is the pan lets a lot of powder, at least with 4350, bounce out. Like I said, I usually just collect it down here, and then if I need one extra piece of powder, like 1 granule, I can just pick that up. Usually what I'll do is take the brush and kind of roll it up and catch it in the whiskers of the brush, and then I can drop it into the into my case as I'm loading. But that's one thing that's kind of frustrating, that they don't have a better system to keep the powder from bouncing out of the pan. Somebody needs to come out with an upgraded pan for this model for sure. Okay, so one thing we can take a quick look at is going to be the emptying procedure here. Now you probably noticed that I've got some papers down here. Probably not required, but I saw something that somebody had said about keeping static under control by putting some dryer sheets underneath it, so I decided to just give it a try. Okay, so you can see there are these marks here. Now that's going to be your center of gravity, so if you go too far back from here, it will start to tip over, but as long as you keep that right on line with the edge of your workbench, you should stay level and not drop anything. Now there is a funnel underneath here where you can insert this tube and then get your powder jug and then give this a spin, and it should unlock and empty right into here. So as you can see, that's a very, very easy way to empty a powder dispenser. So it looks like it actually only empties out of the large tube. So anything that's left in the small tube side is not going to empty out of the bottom. So something to be aware of. I just turn this back, and that is sealed back up. Now if you were, wanting to completely empty it back out, obviously you just want to take off your covers and then run it through on trickle. And that's probably going to take a little while, but you get the idea. So you can do that and get anything else that is left in, get it all flushed out, give it a tip forward, get anything out of the tubes, and you should be in good shape. Hey, if you're the kind of person that likes to try and get the latest and greatest or the best thing that you possibly can for what you're trying to do, go ahead and get subscribed, because I may not be able to afford all the coolest stuff, but what I can get, I'm going to get and test out. And so far, this is becoming one of my favorites. Well, I think that'll go over most of what I have figured out so far on the Matchmaster powder dispenser. Like I said, it's a lot more complex and user configurable, I would say, than the Frankford that I've been using. It is much more precise and much more accurate, but you do have to do a lot more trial and error to get all these settings set the best way for your powder. If it had a powder calculation type thing like the Frankfurt does, that would make this hands down the best powder dispenser possible. But since it doesn't have that, you really do have to spend some time learning what each of the adjustments control and how to best set them for the speed that you want to be able to dispense at and stay within the accuracy parameters that you're looking for. So I'm going for all of my cases to be charged within 0.04 range of each other. So I know when I mess up, it's all on me, and my ammo is loaded as best as it could possibly be. So any mistakes are always going to fall on me, at least when I'm running my PRS rig. So please do let me know down in the comments if you got any questions or something that you want to see more specific about this. I think I've started to get it figured out pretty well, but any way I can help anybody else out there, I'm happy to. So please do let me know down in the comments here, and I'll help any way I possibly can. I think that's going to do it for this video, taking a look at the RCBS Matchmaster powder dispenser and some of the tricks that I figured out on how to set it up properly, especially using the app. You can do everything that I just showed you without using the app, but it is kind of a bear and a lot of pushing buttons on the screen, and very easy to get off doing that. So I highly recommend just use the app, and you've got a lot more capabilities. It just takes a few seconds for it to send the info that you put in on the app to the unit itself and then start actually functioning. So once it gets up and running, it's awesome. Thank you very much for hanging out with me for a few minutes on this one. I really do hope you have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.